What if I told you one of Africa's greatest kingdoms was hidden from history for centuries? A city built without cement, surrounded by towering stone walls. So extraordinary, many refused to believe Africans had built it. But who created Great Zimbabwe? And why did this wealthy kingdom disappear? Stay with us as
the Great
archaeology
Zimbabwe
reveals a
complex
truth
stands as a
that may
testament
change
to
the
a
way
powerful
you see
civilization.
history. Imagine walking through the middle of Africa. Dense forests surround you. The sound of birds echoes across the hills. Then suddenly, you stop. Standing in front of you are giant stone walls. Some rise nearly 11 meters into the sky. Thousands upon thousands of perfectly stacked granite blocks. No cement, no concrete, no modern machinery. Just stone, carefully placed, one upon another. Now here's my question for you. Who do you think built this incredible city? Was it a forgotten African kingdom? Ancient Egyptians? Foreign explorers? Or could history itself have hidden the real answer for centuries? Don't answer too quickly. Pause for just a second and write your guess in the comments right now. At the very end of this documentary, I'll show you what archaeologists, historians, and modern scientific research have discovered. And I promise, the real answer is more fascinating than most people imagine. Because for hundreds of years, even experts refused to believe the truth. But before we uncover one of Africa's greatest mysteries, if you enjoy documentaries that reveal hidden history, forgotten civilizations, and real archaeological discoveries, take just 1 second to like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on the bell icon. Every documentary we create is based on real places, real history, and the mysteries that changed our understanding of Africa forever. Now, close your eyes for a moment, and imagine it's the year 1450. The morning sun rises over southern Africa. Golden light slowly spreads across a massive city, unlike anything most people imagine when they think of medieval Africa. Smoke rises from hundreds of homes. Merchants prepare valuable goods for trade. Blacksmiths shape glowing iron with remarkable skill. Children run through stone passageways. Cattle fill enormous enclosures inside the city. The sounds of people buying, selling, building, and celebrating echo through the valley. This wasn't a forgotten village. This was one of the richest cities in Africa. A kingdom connected to international trade routes stretching thousands of kilometers. Gold, ivory, copper, and precious goods flowed through this city long before many Europeans even knew it existed. Its rulers controlled vast trading networks that reached the eastern coast of Africa, where merchants from Arabia, Persia, India, and later China exchanged luxury goods through the ports of the Indian Ocean. This city had wealth, power, architecture, trade, organization, everything expected of a great civilization. Yet today, millions of people have never even heard its name. That city was Great Zimbabwe. For centuries, its enormous stone walls stood silently beneath the African sky. Generation after generation passed. Empires rose. Empires fell. The city slowly emptied. Nature reclaimed its streets. Trees grew between its stones. Grass covered its ancient pathways. And eventually, the outside world forgot it had ever existed. Or perhaps, the world chose not to remember. Because when European explorers first reached these extraordinary ruins during the 19th century, many simply refused to believe that Africans could have built such an advanced stone city. Some claimed it had been built by ancient civilizations from far away. Others invented stories linking it to biblical kingdoms or mysterious foreign builders. These ideas spread quickly, not because the evidence supported them, but because many people at that time carried deep colonial prejudices about Africa's history. The ruins became surrounded by myths that overshadowed the people who had actually created them. But archaeology would eventually tell a different story. A story written not in books, but in stone, in pottery, in trade goods, and in the landscape itself. And as researchers began carefully studying every wall, every artifact, and every layer of soil, they realized something extraordinary. The greatest mystery wasn't who built Great Zimbabwe. The greatest mystery was how an African kingdom became so powerful and why it was eventually abandoned. That question would lead archaeologists into one of the most remarkable historical investigations ever carried out in Africa. But before they uncovered the truth, they had to understand something hidden beneath the stones, a clue that almost everyone had overlooked. And believe me, what they discovered next completely changed the way historians viewed African civilization. We'll uncover that clue in just a moment. Before archaeologists could answer the greatest mystery, they had to ask a much simpler question. What exactly was Great Zimbabwe? Was it a fortress? A temple? A palace? Or something completely different? To find the answer, imagine you're standing outside the city nearly 600 years ago. The first thing you notice isn't the people. It isn't the noise. It isn't even the wealth. It's the walls. Towering walls of carefully shaped granite blocks stretch across the landscape. Some sections are more than 11 meters high and several meters thick, built without mortar. Each stone was carefully selected and balanced with remarkable precision. Even today, many of those walls are still standing. Think about that for a moment. No modern cranes, no concrete, no steel. Yet these walls have survived centuries of rain, wind, and changing seasons. How? That question puzzled early visitors, and believe it or not, the deeper archaeologists looked, the more impressive the city became. As you walk through one of the narrow stone passages, sunlight slips between the walls, creating long shadows across the ground. Every turn seems to hide another courtyard, another entrance, another mystery. Nothing about this place feels random. The city was carefully planned. Certain areas were designed to control movement. Others protected important buildings. Some spaces were likely used for ceremonies, others for daily life. This wasn't simply a collection of houses. It was a capital, the heart of a powerful kingdom. Now imagine the city at its peak. Thousands of people move through its streets. Women carry beautifully crafted pottery filled with grain. Blacksmiths strike glowing iron, sending sparks into the morning air. Children chase each other between stone walls. Merchants arrive with cattle, gold, ivory, copper, and handmade goods from nearby communities. The city is alive. Every sound tells the same story: prosperity, organization, power. But then, you notice something unusual. Near the center of the complex stands a strange stone structure unlike anything else in southern Africa. A massive cone-shaped tower built entirely from granite blocks. Solid, windowless, without doors, without stairs, without any obvious purpose. Even today, archaeologists still debate exactly why it was built. Some believe it symbolized royal authority. Others think it represented wealth, food storage, or political power. The truth is, no written records have survived to explain its exact meaning. And perhaps, that's exactly why the tower continues to fascinate historians today. But the mysteries didn't stop there. As excavations continued, researchers began discovering objects that seemed completely out of place. Tiny glass beads, delicate Chinese porcelain, Persian ceramics, imported goods from lands thousands of kilometers away. How could these objects end up in the middle of southern Africa? Had travelers carried them across deserts? Had foreign kingdoms visited this city? Or was Great Zimbabwe connected to something much bigger than anyone had imagined? That single discovery changed everything, because those artifacts proved one extraordinary fact. Great Zimbabwe wasn't isolated. It was part of an international trade network connecting Africa with the wider world through the Indian Ocean. Gold mined in the interior traveled east. Ivory followed the same routes. In return, luxury goods arrived from distant lands. Imagine standing inside this city nearly 600 years ago. A merchant speaks a local language. Another has traveled from the Swahili coast. Some goods may have passed through Arab traders. Others had begun their journey in Asia before finally reaching this remarkable African kingdom. Suddenly, Great Zimbabwe no longer looked like a forgotten city. It looked like one of the most important trading centers in medieval Africa. But that discovery created an even bigger mystery. If this kingdom was so wealthy, so organized, and so connected to international trade, why did it disappear? Why would people abandon such an extraordinary city? Did war destroy it? Did disease spread through its streets? Did invaders conquer the kingdom? Or was the real reason something almost no one expected? Don't answer yet, because the evidence hidden beneath the soil tells a completely different story. And trust me, the next discovery surprised even experienced archaeologists. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this journey through Africa's hidden history, take 1 second to like this video and subscribe to Africa Uncovered. It helps us bring you more documentaries, myths. And here's another question for you. If you had lived in Great Zimbabwe during its golden age, would you have stayed there forever? Or would you have joined the merchants traveling across Africa in search of new opportunities? Write your answer in the comments, because in the next chapter, we'll uncover the real source of Great Zimbabwe's incredible wealth and the surprising clues that explain why one of Africa's greatest kingdoms slowly faded into history. The deeper archaeologists dug, the more one question refused to disappear. Where did all this wealth come from? Think about it. Building enormous stone walls required thousands of workers. Supporting a large city demanded food, water, skilled craftsmen, and strong leadership. Trading with distant civilizations required valuable goods. So, what made Great Zimbabwe so rich? The answer was hidden beneath the African soil. Gold. Not small amounts, not scattered pieces, but rich gold fields spread across the surrounding region. For generations, skilled African miners extracted gold from the earth using techniques passed down through families. This gold wasn't kept inside the kingdom, it became the kingdom's greatest export. Imagine the early morning. Groups of miners leave before sunrise, carrying simple iron tools, working for hours beneath the hot African sun, slowly collecting one of the world's most valuable metals. Every piece of gold represented opportunity, power, trade, influence. But here's something many people don't realize. The people of Great Zimbabwe didn't become wealthy simply because they had gold. Many kingdoms possessed natural resources. What made Great Zimbabwe extraordinary was that it controlled the trade. Gold moved from inland mining communities toward the eastern coast of Africa. There, bustling Swahili port cities connected Africa to merchants sailing across the Indian Ocean. Ships carried African gold toward Arabia, Persia, India, and even China. In return, luxury goods arrived back in Africa. Beautiful glass beads, fine ceramics, elegant fabrics, metal objects, rare ornaments. Every imported object discovered inside Great Zimbabwe tells the same story. This kingdom wasn't isolated. It was connected to the medieval world. Imagine standing inside one of the city's marketplaces. A trader unwraps colorful glass beads. Another carefully displays fine pottery that had traveled thousands of kilometers. Nearby, gold changes hands. Cattle are exchanged. Iron tools are inspected. People negotiate prices. Different languages fill the air. This wasn't merely a local market. It was an international trading center. And that wealth transformed the kingdom. The rulers of Great Zimbabwe gained influence over surrounding communities. People respected them. Allies traded with them. Travelers visited them. Their reputation spread across southern Africa. But then, archaeologists noticed something unexpected. Despite all this wealth, they found no massive royal tombs filled with treasure. No golden crowns. No enormous statues celebrating kings. No written records boasting about victories. Why? Most powerful kingdoms leave behind monuments celebrating their rulers. Great Zimbabwe did something different. Its greatest monument was the city itself. Its carefully built walls, its remarkable engineering, its organization. Perhaps that tells us something important about the people who lived here. But another mystery was waiting beneath the ruins. Researchers studying animal bones discovered that the city's population had grown dramatically over time. More people meant greater success. But it also meant something else. Greater pressure on the land. More cattle needed grazing. More forests were cut for firewood. More farmland was required to feed thousands of people. For many years, the environment supported this growing kingdom. Then, slowly, conditions began changing. Rainfall became less predictable. Nearby resources became harder to manage. Trade routes also started shifting toward other regional centers. No single event destroyed Great Zimbabwe. Instead, evidence suggests a combination of environmental changes, economic shifts, and political developments gradually reduced the city's importance over time. Historians continue to study exactly how these factors interacted, but the decline appears to have happened over decades rather than in one sudden catastrophe. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. There wasn't one dramatic ending. There wasn't one final battle. The kingdom slowly transformed. Families moved. Leaders established new centers elsewhere. Trade continued, just not here. The great stone city was no longer the heart of a growing kingdom. Little by little, its streets became quieter. Its marketplaces became emptier. Its stone walls remained, watching silently as history moved on. But here's the question. If the city wasn't destroyed, why did so many people forget who built it? How could one of Africa's greatest civilizations become surrounded by myths for centuries? The answer has everything to do with what happened when European explorers first entered these ruins. And trust me, that chapter of history is just as surprising as the city itself. Before we continue, how are you enjoying this documentary so far? If you're discovering something new today, Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Africa Uncovered. Your support helps us bring you more documentaries based on real history, archaeology, and scientific evidence. And here's another question for you. If you had been an explorer discovering these giant stone ruins for the very first time, what would your first thought have been? Write your answer in the comments. Because in the next chapter, we'll uncover why the world refused to believe who really built Great Zimbabwe, and how archaeology finally uncovered the truth buried beneath centuries of misunderstanding. The year is 1871. After weeks of traveling across the rugged landscape of southern Africa, a European explorer finally reaches a place that local communities have known about for generations. As the morning mist begins to lift, he freezes. Before him stand enormous stone walls, perfectly balanced granite blocks, towering passages, ancient towers, and a city unlike anything he expected to find. For a moment, even he struggles to believe his own eyes. How could such an extraordinary city exist here? Word of the discovery spread quickly across Europe. Newspapers wrote about the mysterious ruins. Maps were updated. Explorers became eager to visit. Historians searched for answers. But instead of following the evidence, many people followed their own assumptions. At that time, much of the outside world viewed Africa through the lens of colonial prejudice. Because of those biased beliefs, not because of archaeological evidence, many writers insisted that such an impressive city must have been built by someone other than the local African ancestors. Some claimed it had been built by ancient Phoenicians. Others pointed toward Arab traders. Some even connected it to biblical stories involving King Solomon or the Queen of Sheba. The theories became more imaginative with every passing year. Books were written. Newspapers repeated them. Travelers carried these stories around the world. And slowly, the myths became more famous than the ruins themselves. But there was one problem. There was almost no archaeological evidence supporting those claims. Researchers who carefully studied the site kept finding something very different. The pottery matched local traditions. The iron tools matched regional technology. The architecture evolved over time in ways consistent with local building practices. The food remains reflected local farming and cattle keeping. Everything pointed in the same direction. The ancestors of the Shona people had built Great Zimbabwe. Yet for decades, many people refused to accept that conclusion. Why? Because accepting it meant challenging deeply rooted colonial ideas about Africa's past. History, sometimes, is shaped not only by discoveries, but also by the beliefs people bring with them. Fortunately, science does not rely on assumptions. It relies on evidence. During the 20th century, archaeologists returned to Great Zimbabwe with better excavation methods and more careful documentation. Layer by layer, stone by stone, artifact by artifact, a much clearer picture began to emerge. Radiocarbon dating placed the city's main period of growth between the 11th and 15th centuries. Imported trade goods showed long-distance commercial connections. Local craftsmanship demonstrated remarkable engineering skills. There was no need to invent foreign builders. The evidence already told the real story. And perhaps that truth was even more impressive, because it revealed something the world had overlooked for far too long. Great Zimbabwe was not an exception. It was proof that complex kingdoms, advanced architecture, and international trade flourished in parts of Africa long before many people outside the continent understood their history. Sometimes, the greatest mystery isn't what happened in the past. The greatest mystery is why the truth took so long to be accepted. As archaeologists continued uncovering the city's secrets, they realized Great Zimbabwe wasn't just changing African history, it was changing world history. Every new discovery challenged old assumptions. Every artifact gave a voice to people whose achievements had been ignored. Every stone became part of a much larger story. But another mystery still remained. If Great Zimbabwe was once one of the richest kingdoms in southern Africa, where did all that wealth go? What happened after the city's influence declined? Did another kingdom inherit its power? Did the trade routes disappear? Or did history simply move somewhere else? The answers would lead archaeologists beyond the walls of Great Zimbabwe, into the rise of new African kingdoms that carried its legacy forward. Before we continue, we've now reached the halfway point of this documentary. If you're enjoying the journey and discovering a side of African history you hadn't heard before, please like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on the bell icon. Your support helps us bring carefully researched documentaries to millions of viewers around the world. And here's today's biggest question so far. Why do you think so many people ignored the archaeological evidence for so many years? Do you think it was simply a lack of information? Or did old assumptions shape the way history was written? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because in the next chapter, we'll uncover what happened after Great Zimbabwe declined, and why its legacy continued long after the city itself became quiet. What if I told you Great Zimbabwe didn't simply vanish? It evolved. For years, people imagined the city had been abandoned overnight, that everyone suddenly disappeared, that something mysterious had forced an entire civilization to leave. It sounds like the perfect mystery. But archaeology tells a different story, a much more fascinating story. Imagine you're living inside Great Zimbabwe during its final years. The markets are still open. Children still play inside the stone walls. Cattle still fill the great enclosures. But something feels different. Every year, a few more families leave. Some merchants choose new trading routes. A few skilled craftsmen move north. Village by village, the kingdom slowly begins to change. Not because of one disaster, but because history itself is moving forward. Trade routes that once made Great Zimbabwe incredibly wealthy begin shifting toward new regional centers. Nearby kingdoms grow stronger. Political power gradually changes hands. At the same time, the growing population places increasing pressure on the surrounding environment. More trees are needed for homes and fuel. More land is cleared for farming. Larger cattle herds require more grazing land. Researchers believe these changes, together with evolving trade and politics, likely contributed to the city's gradual decline. Notice something important. There wasn't one dramatic ending. No massive battle. No invading army burning the city to the ground. No single catastrophe. Instead, the heartbeat of the kingdom slowly became quieter. Year after year after year. And eventually, Great Zimbabwe was no longer the political center it had once been. But here's where the story becomes even more interesting. The people didn't disappear. They carried their knowledge with them. Their traditions continued. Their language survived. Their descendants established new kingdoms across southern Africa. One of those kingdoms became known as the Kingdom of Mutapa. It inherited important trade connections and continued exchanging gold and other valuable goods with merchants along the East African coast. In other words, Great Zimbabwe wasn't the end of a civilization. It was the beginning of another chapter. History had simply changed direction. The city returns to silence. As decades passed, nature slowly reclaimed what people had built. Grass grew between the stones. Small trees appeared inside abandoned courtyards. Rain washed across ancient pathways. Birds nested where merchants once negotiated prices. The echoes of thousands of voices slowly faded into silence. Imagine walking through those ruins centuries later. The walls still stand. The famous conical tower still rises proudly. But there are no markets, no kings, no ceremonies. Only wind moving through ancient stone passages. It almost feels as if the city is waiting for someone to remember its story. And eventually, someone did. Archaeologists, historians, local communities. Together, they pieced the story back together. Not through myths, not through legends, but through evidence. Pottery, stone tools, trade goods, animal remains, architectural patterns. Every discovery became another sentence in the forgotten story of Great Zimbabwe. And little by little, the truth returned. A World Heritage treasure. Today, Great Zimbabwe is recognized as one of Africa's most important archaeological sites. People from around the world travel thousands of kilometers just to walk among these remarkable stone walls. Not because of myths, but because of what they represent. Human creativity, engineering, trade, culture, resilience. The ruins remind us that remarkable civilizations have existed across Africa for centuries. Yet even today, many people have never heard their story. And perhaps that's the greatest mystery of all. How could one of Africa's greatest kingdoms remain unknown to so much of the world? Before we continue, we've now uncovered how Great Zimbabwe rose to power, how it became wealthy, and why it gradually declined. But the most important question still remains. Why does Great Zimbabwe matter today? If these walls are hundreds of years old, why should anyone in the modern world care? Stay with us, because the final chapters answer that question in a way that may completely change how you think about African history. And before we continue, if this documentary has surprised you so far, please take 1 second to like this video and subscribe to Africa Uncovered. We're getting closer to 100,000 subscribers, and every like helps these real African stories reach people around the world. Now tell us in the comments, before watching this documentary, had you ever heard of Great Zimbabwe? Be honest, because your answer may reveal exactly why this incredible city deserves to be remembered. Let's go back to the very beginning of this documentary. Remember the question I asked you? Who built Great Zimbabwe? At that moment, some of you may have thought ancient Egyptians, foreign explorers, the Phoenicians, the Queen of Sheba, or perhaps an unknown civilization that disappeared forever. Those theories sound exciting. They make great legends. But history isn't written by imagination. It's written by evidence. And after more than a century of archaeological research, the evidence points overwhelmingly in one direction. The ancestors of the Shona people built Great Zimbabwe. Not because someone wanted that answer, but because the stones, the pottery, the tools, the architecture, the trade goods, and the radiocarbon dates all tell the same story. Sometimes, the truth is even more incredible than the myth. Because think about what these people achieved. Without modern machinery, they built one of Africa's greatest stone cities. Without written blueprints, they created walls that have survived for centuries. Without modern transportation, They connected their kingdom to international trade networks stretching across the Indian Ocean. This wasn't luck. It was knowledge, skill, planning, leadership. Generation after generation, working together. The stones still speak. Today, millions of tourists walk through Great Zimbabwe every year. Some arrive expecting mystery. Others come searching for history. But almost everyone leaves with the same feeling: respect. Because standing beside those enormous granite walls, you suddenly realize something. Every stone was lifted by human hands. Every passage was carefully planned. Every wall tells a story. Imagine one worker placing a single stone nearly 700 years ago. He had no idea that centuries later, people from every corner of the world would travel thousands of kilometers just to see his work. He wasn't building for tourists. He wasn't building for fame. He was building a city for his people. And somehow, his work survived longer than many empires. That is extraordinary. History was always there. For a long time, many history books barely mentioned Great Zimbabwe. Some ignored it completely. Others repeated theories that archaeology had already disproved. But over the years, new discoveries changed that. Researchers continued excavating. Dating methods improved. Historical understanding became more accurate. Today, Great Zimbabwe is recognized as one of the greatest achievements of medieval Africa. Not because history changed, but because our understanding became better. This reminds us of something important. Sometimes, history doesn't disappear. People simply stop listening to it. And when they finally do, the truth has been waiting all along. What Great Zimbabwe teaches us. This story isn't only about ancient stone walls. It's about curiosity. It's about questioning assumptions. It's about allowing evidence to guide our understanding instead of myths or prejudice. Great Zimbabwe teaches us that remarkable civilizations have existed in every part of the world. Some became famous, others were forgotten. But forgotten does not mean unimportant. In fact, some of the world's greatest stories remain hidden simply because too few people know where to look. And that's exactly why documentaries like this matter. Because every forgotten city, every abandoned kingdom, every silent ruin still has a story waiting to be told. Before we move to the final chapter, if you've enjoyed this journey through one of Africa's greatest historical mysteries, please take 1 second to like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on the bell icon. Your support helps us bring more real stories backed by archaeology, science, and history. And here's one final question before the ending. Do you think there are still ancient cities hidden somewhere in Africa that archaeologists haven't discovered yet? Write your answer in the comments. Because in our final chapter, we'll answer the very first question we asked. Reflect on why Great Zimbabwe still matters today. And leave you with one thought that may change the way you look at history forever. Before we end this journey, let's return to the question that started everything. Who really built Great Zimbabwe? If you guessed, the ancestors of the Shona people, you were right. Not because of myths, not because of legends, but because decades of archaeological research, radiocarbon dating, local traditions, architecture, pottery, and trade evidence all point to the same conclusion. The answer wasn't hidden. It was simply ignored for far too long. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson this city teaches us. Sometimes, history isn't lost, it's overlooked. Imagine standing alone inside the great enclosure just before sunset. The warm African sun slowly disappears behind the distant hills. Golden light touches every ancient stone. The air is completely still. No merchants, no kings, no blacksmiths, no children laughing through the narrow passageways. Only silence. But if these walls could speak, what stories would they tell? Would they tell us about the first builders who carried thousands of granite blocks one by one? Would they tell us about traders who returned from the Indian Ocean carrying glass beads and fine porcelain? Would they tell us about the rulers who watched over one of the richest kingdoms in southern Africa? Or would they simply remind us that every great civilization, no matter how powerful, eventually changes? Because history is never frozen. It moves. Kingdoms rise. Kingdoms transform. New cities replace old ones, but their legacy remains, a symbol of a nation. Today, Great Zimbabwe is more than an archaeological site. It has become a powerful symbol of Zimbabwe's national identity. In fact, the country's very name, Zimbabwe, comes from these ancient stone ruins. Its famous Zimbabwe bird, carved centuries ago from soapstone, became a national symbol and appears on the country's flag, official emblems, and currency. Think about that. A civilization that many people once doubted had even existed now gives its name to an entire nation. History has a remarkable way of correcting itself. Slowly, patiently, stone by stone. The real treasure. Many people believe the greatest treasure of Great Zimbabwe was gold. Others say it was ivory. Some think it was its trade routes. But perhaps the greatest treasure was knowledge. The knowledge that African civilizations developed remarkable architecture. The knowledge that international trade connected distant cultures long before the modern world. The knowledge that history becomes richer when every civilization is given the recognition it deserves. Because once you understand Great Zimbabwe, you no longer see Africa as a continent of forgotten stories. You begin to see it as a continent filled with civilizations that helped shape the world. And that changes everything. One final question. Before this documentary ends, I want to ask you one last question. How many other incredible civilizations do you think are missing from the history books you've read? Think about it. If Great Zimbabwe remained misunderstood for generations, what other stories are still waiting beneath forests, hidden under deserts, or buried beneath layers of time? Maybe the next great discovery hasn't been made yet. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with us until the end. If this documentary changed the way you think about African history, please like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on the bell icon. Your support helps us uncover real stories, forgotten kingdoms, hidden mysteries, and extraordinary discoveries from across Africa. And now, as promised at the very beginning, here's the answer to our opening question. Who built Great Zimbabwe? The strongest archaeological evidence shows that it was built and expanded by the ancestors of the Shona people, who created one of medieval Africa's greatest urban centers and connected it to vast regional and international trade networks. The mystery was never that Africa lacked great civilizations. The mystery was why the world took so long to recognize them. Because sometimes, the greatest discoveries aren't new discoveries at all. They're old truths finally being heard. This is Africa Uncovered. Thank you for watching. And remember, the next mystery is already waiting.